So up on the World Trade Center, there's a pair of Lee jeans that are attached to a kite, and it's flying up, but E.T., the extraterrestrial, who has some burning yen in a teacup, he's saying, no, 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 and he wants to take care of something, but of course, in his way is the author, Zola, and with Zola is Che Guevara, and they're really not sure what's going on, and you may not be either, but this is an example of magnetic imagery in a memory palace, or on a memory palace in this case, and a very interesting example indeed, because this particular set of mnemonic magnetic images are on a memory palace that no longer exists. So I'm going to unpack that in this video. It's all for memorizing a Chinese phrase, a very, very good phrase to know, and that's coming right up. Hey there, this is Anthony Metivier from MagneticMemoryMethod.com, the channel devoted to giving you every possible advantage for using your memory when you want to learn, well, anything, although I do focus a lot on how these techniques apply to language learning. And this video is part of a series that goes through a lot of examples of mnemonics that you can use for Chinese phrases. So if you want to make sure that you are able to see the rest of those videos, then click the link below. It'll take you to the beginning of that playlist. And of course, if you're not subscribed to this channel, well, hit that subscribe button, because we do a lot of training like this for helping you use memory techniques for language learning. And if you like Chinese, there are more examples coming, as well as for other languages, language as such, and any topic under the sun, especially with your guidance. So if you have ideas what you'd like to see next on this channel, then put them down in the discussion below. And if you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button, let me know you're engaged. And now let me unravel what exactly it is that I'm seeing in my mind in order to help me recall what phrase. Now I should say that my pronunciation on this isn't perfect, and I don't intend to teach Chinese at all, because I'm just learning it. But when I want to learn a new phrase and I just want to hear it once and memorize it forever, then the basis is don't worry too much about the pronunciation, get the groundwork going so that I can work on the pronunciation from my mind. And so the way to think about this is maybe like how a singer isn't really singing a song and working on the interpretation, on the delivery of the song until they've memorized the lyrics, right? Because there's a depth of meaning, there's a depth of connection that never happens unless the lyrics are memorized. And I think it's very, very similar when it goes to language learning. Now some people will say, no, 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 make sure you memorize the pronunciation correctly first, or else you're going to curse yourself to constantly making those mistakes. And you know what, there's some truth to that, and there's all kinds of advice. Myself, my own journey, I worry about making sure that I get as close as possible and then work on the pronunciation later. And I maybe got this habit from learning music, where I was always taught to learn the scales as fast as possible and then clean it up. Clean landing up on the exact notes later when you actually can land on the exact notes. So maybe that's just a different experience. But in any case, I'm putting this all before uttering this phrase because I really, really am focused on actually getting something to work on rather than fussing and being a perfectionist over pronunciation, which is something that stops so many language learners from getting meaningful progress quickly, especially when they want to use memory techniques, because there's no one-to-one correspondence necessarily between the magnetic imagery and the pronunciation, although what you're trying to do as much as possible is create very strong correspondences between the sound and the meaning of the phrase or the core vocabulary, if you're just doing a word at a time, and the actual imagery that you're creating. So let's look at this. The phrase, and here I'm doing this from memory, so correct me if I'm wrong, putting my neck out here a little bit, but it's 我们离开以前说了这个事, and basically that means we leave before this thing do this thing. We should do that. We got to do this thing before we leave is essentially what it is. And I just was walking along with April, and I just said, you know, we got to remember to do this before we leave. And I said, how do you say that in Chinese? And she told me how she would say it. And so it's not a one-to-one translation of what it was that I wanted, but that's just how she would say it, and basically how she's going to understand it, and I assume other Chinese people in her family in particular and circle of friends are going to understand it, and they always get a tickle out of hearing me speak Chinese, so as long as it works for them, I guess it's pretty good. But the point is I like to just hear it once and then actually be able to memorize it. And so we were walking, and I just, for whatever reason, didn't have a memory palace in mind in particular, and I just thought of the World Trade Center. This is an interesting one because I haven't been to the World Trade Center when it was there. I only moved to New York after it was no longer there and visited Ground Zero, so I have no personal connection to the World Trade Center, which is not normally how I would operate, but I was just walking, somehow it came to mind. The more that you practice these techniques, the more things come to mind. They just pop, they just appear. And so how you get there is by creating lots of memory palaces and creating lots of magnetic imagery, and you'll be able to encode that fast. And this process of taking a sound and then encoding it is really something that anybody can do, and you just get started by starting to practice to do it, and don't give in to frustration or anything like that. Just go with it, just do it. It's really, really powerful. So woman I didn't do because I already know that is we, right? I know this, I don't need to make an image for it. But the first thing that I needed to make an image for was Li Kai, and so I just saw Li jeans and a kite pulling them up. Then the next thing is Yi Qian, and so ET comes there really, really nicely. And then when there's a Qian sound, I tend to see a teacup with yen burning in it on fire. And that's a very, very powerful image because and it sounds like what it sounds like, and it's very close, and then you can correct the tones later. And so in this case I do need to, because it's like, is it Li Kai or is it Li Kai or is it Li Kai? And I'll ask, and then if necessary, I will use the major method to figure out what those numbers are and then add an image. So if it's like 1-1, then I will have a toad, and a very specific toad. If it's 3-4, then I'll have a ram, and so forth. So there's lots and lots of things, and the major method is really, really well worth learning for Chinese and for the tones, especially if you have a deck of cards memorized and then you have a card for almost all of the combinations of the tones, and you just add that in. It's really, really powerful. In any case, Yi Qian, and then so So La Che Ga Shi, and so it's not a one-to-one sound correspondence. It could make you sound wrong, so you just got to work on making sure you're pronouncing this correctly through the actual practice of pronunciation and having the correction of a native speaker. But Zola, the author, works really, really great. If you don't know him and you're learning Chinese, well, that sound is going to come up so often, you might want to go to Wikipedia and have a look at old Zola. And if you're going to read Zola, I recommend Germinal, which is just a great novel, and actually some people think it's one of the precursors to the zombie genre. So if you want to be a little bit more historical, maybe slightly academic or scholarly, then you could read Germinal as a kind of proto-zombie novel. No, there's no zombies in it, but the idea of human slaves, the living dead, and so forth, it's there, trust me. It's great. And then Che Ga, of course, is Che Guevara. What else would it be, right? Well, if you don't know Che Guevara, might be useful for you, because there's a lot of Che Ga in in Chinese. And then this Shi at the end, I didn't really sort of have an image for that either. So, well, you know, just you pick your battles. If you think you're going to memorize it, then you should usually create an image. But if you think you're going to be okay, then, you know, take your risk. And I may even be making a risk on this video. I may have forgotten the whole part, but I think I got the whole thing here. And I really love this because I don't have to have it repeated to me again and again and again. I don't have to have index cards over and over and over again. All I have to do is learn it and encode it, and then practice speaking it a sufficient number of times, which as a general rule of thumb is about 5 times the first day learning it, once a day at least for the next 5 days, and then if it isn't already encoded and part of speaking and so forth, then maybe once a week for 5 weeks, and it goes like that. And you can do this with as much vocabulary or phrases as you want on any given day, everybody will come up with their own sort of comfort zone, and you want to push that comfort zone so that you're always a bit challenged, but never go to the point where you're frustrated, because that'll cause you to quit. And we know that that frustration comes from the insular cortex, or much of it does, and it's just spiking particular chemicals in the brain that make you feel overwhelmed and think, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to do this, it's too difficult and so forth. Don't give in to that stuff. Find your challenge frustration curve and then figure out how that you can do this daily or near daily when you're learning a language like Chinese, and make sure you have a good source of some good Chinese. Not everybody has a wife that they can learn Chinese with, and not everybody can go on, say, italki, which I did when I first started learning German, which I highly recommend you do too. Sometimes it's called italki. I don't know if there's a consensus on how that's supposed to be pronounced. If there is, then let me know so I can memorize it. But the whole thing is, you can find people to speak with somehow, somewhere, and you should, so that you can actually practice this with people. But you got to get it into memory first so that you can actually work with it. And I like to recommend the Chinese Vault for learning these techniques, or rather learning, having a good source of phrases that you might actually want to use, actually having pronunciations of them from native speakers in different parts of China, so you can cross-reference and have a greater range, and there's a little bit of discussion with each one, and it's really, really amazing, the Chinese Vault. Highly recommend it. And if you use the link down below, then you'll also be eligible to get some great bonuses from me. For example, there's a training video on how to use the major method and how to use the major method for memorizing tones. There's a special training going more into creating the memory palaces and being able to associate quicker, create these images quicker, and there's also some training there around the big five of language learning, which you're able to access in the form of a course called The Ultimate Language Learning Secret. So if you want a great source of Chinese phrases, then I highly, highly recommend the Chinese Vault. It's from Mandarin HQ. Angel's absolutely amazing teacher of Chinese, and she's not the only person speaking these phrases. Again, there's at least 5 people, and it's in a question and answer format, so you hear different sounds of each phrase in the form of a question, and then you hear each one in the form of an answer. It's just really, really amazing, and you're gonna have a great, great time listening to these people speak. And then you use these tools, so you only have to hear them a couple of times, and then you can make images in memory palaces and have it done with, so that you have it actually in use very, very quickly. So check that out. The link is down below, maybe appearing here on the screen. You can click that, and if it's for you, then I want you to get it, because it's an amazing, amazing source of Chinese phrases, and you'll follow a certain process and be able to get access to these bonuses. Also, there's a Chinese Facebook group that I have. We're not, at the moment that I'm recording this, doing a Chinese daily phrase challenge, but you'll be able to access the previous one, follow along, actually participate in it if you want, and then when the next one comes along, then you will be part of that group and be able to participate. So that's just some cool stuff that I put together for people who want to use Chinese. So if you like this, hit that thumbs up button to let me know, and if you want a source of Chinese, grab that link below. And if you haven't taken my free course on memory training, well, that link is down below too, but I really want to preface that you get the Chinese Vault, or at least know about it. And I hope this example helped you. I hope that you're able to have some deeper insight into how you can just create images on the fly, associate them with some space. Space is the biggest resource that we have in memory. Space is the ultimate in which everything occurs, or that contains everything. Beautiful, beautiful Greek phrase. And that's from Thales, the philosopher, often considered to be the first philosopher. So yeah, anyway, that's how these memory techniques work. And you're really, you know, you're not trying to show off or anything like that. You're actually just trying to look at information once and memorize it, and then be able to go play it through your mind a couple of times, check it against the record, and then go, yes, I've gotten that correct. And that's how it works. And it works really, really well, especially if you're like me and you just don't want devices, you don't want index cards, you don't want any of that stuff. You just want to be able to memorize information using the natural powers of your imagination. and it's really, really fun. I love it so much. So thanks for watching again, and until we have a chance to speak again, let me know down in the comments what you think of these kinds of techniques. Are you using them? Check out the Chinese Vault and keep yourself magnetic.